Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Ohio X conversation where we get to examine some really interesting and fun topics about innovation and the future of different sectors and industries in the state. And this is really a timely one. Last week was the groundbreaking of Intel in Ohio, where Ohio showed out and the President of the United States joined us along with Intel's CEO to officially break ground on one of the I think the biggest economic development project in the state, and frankly, it's captured global headlines, and it's fantastic because it combines tech and manufacturing and building things right here in the state, and that's what we're here for today. This conversation, built in Ohio, manufacturing tech, is going to examine what different companies, people, and ideas are happening in this exciting space that has only become more exciting and more relevant over the past couple of years. And we have three experts today that are tackling and working in this space from different angles and different perspectives. They're going to share what they're doing, what their organizations and companies are doing to help continue building things and making things in Ohio, but doing it in incredibly exciting, innovative ways. We also want to thank, before we start, Rev1 Ventures for sponsoring this program, pulling together an incredible panel with us, and being great partners. They're doing great work, and certainly headquartered in Columbus, but doing work all across the United States, which is really fun to follow along. And we're going to learn about some of their latest news and updates in a little bit. One of those is with Worthington Industries, which is also joined by us today. But I want to introduce myself. I'm Chris Berry, President and CEO of Ohio X. We're a statewide technology nonprofit association working to build Ohio's tech hub. We work with startups to Fortune 500s and everything in between to do it. And our companies, organizations, universities, hospital systems, and research centers are located across the state. And each and every day we get to work with them to do some incredible work and help tell their stories, connect tech in the state, and promote what's happening. And that's exactly why we're here today. So I'm going to do a short introduction of each of our panelists, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So you don't have to listen to me read through a bio, but they can share exactly who they are, what they're working on, and some of the things they're going to be touching on in our conversation today. We're going to go for about an hour. At any point, if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to drop it in the chat. You can send it to everyone and put it in the chat for all to see, or you can send it to me directly, and I'll do my best to work it into the conversation. But we're going to start with Mike McCann, who is the Chief Business Development Officer at Rev1 Ventures here in Columbus. Mike, thank you so much for your partnership and all that you've been doing in the work with Ohio X and more broadly for the state. But if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself and what you're up to at Rev1.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for the opportunity, one, to allow us to support what's going on today, and for being a part of it. I'm absolutely thrilled to share a little bit about Rev1 and some of the work that I get to do with our team. I've been with Rev1 for just shy of 10 years now, and for those of you who may not know Rev1, we're also a nonprofit. We're a mission-focused organization, and our mission is to help entrepreneurs and innovators build high-growth, high-tech companies. Our startup studio works across the state and beyond, and we support hundreds of entrepreneurs a year. We make investments directly into those companies, and we're the most active investor by deal count in Ohio. My role specifically at Rev1 is at this really terrific intersection of not only seeing what some of these entrepreneurs are doing and going into market with new technologies and new solutions, but really focused on working with our innovation partners. And where do some of these larger organizations, some of these corporations see their markets going or their companies going in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And how can we start to merge those together? Where can we look at this broader corporate strategy and that little sliver of it that can focus on new startups and new technologies, new solutions, potentially investments? Where can we bring that to the forefront and get it in front of our partners to try to create some unique connection and investment opportunities? So we'll get to share a little bit more about that today. We work in all kinds of different industries, but really excited to talk specifically about manufacturing here.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Mike. We appreciate you being here. And as I said, all the partnership between our organizations. Next up is Michael Liu, who is the Managing Director for Emerging Tech Investments at Worthington Industries. And Michael, if I understand this correctly, it's a bit of a new role, which again, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about today. But you've had some interesting work at a couple of really big companies in the state, in different cities as well. But welcome and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I've been, so my background is mechanical engineering and industrial design. I lived in lovely Cincinnati for on and off about 20 years working for Procter & Gamble, one of those local big companies. And I moved up to Columbus to jumpstart innovation at Worthington Industries. And I've been at Worthington almost 10 years now. And over my career, I think as I've looked at my jobs, they've mostly been in jobs that didn't exist before. And once again, I've jumped into another role. So I came originally to jumpstart innovation and strategy. And since then, I've passed the reins on to someone else to lead that part, because now it's kind of established at Worthington. And now we're looking into venture capital. How do we look at venture capital for this company? And we've had some early success, which was fortunate. But we're really closely partnered with Rev1 and Mike and his gang, because they're helping hold our hands and guiding me through this. I've never actually done the venture capital part of the world before, not on the deal side. And Rev1 is a fabulous partner in that they have all the connections out there. They know they're helping me assess and evaluate. We'll talk about more of that later. But just a great partner. And we look to how do we grow our company, because we are for profit, unlike Rev1. We actually want profits. And when I look at possibilities that we're moving in the future, I'm hugely excited about what we're seeing.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Michael. We appreciate you being here, and looking forward to hearing more about the story of Worthington Industries and this new space you're in. Up next, our final panelist is Karthik, who is a Senior Director of Advanced Manufacturing at JobsOhio. And I'll note JobsOhio is another great partners of ours, which we're incredibly grateful for. And it's been fun to get to work with the team in the different sector verticals that you all have, from manufacturing to financial services, insurance, tech, IT, you name it. It's been, we've had a number of these conversations across different areas. And we've had, I think, at pretty much everyone a JobsOhio representative, because you guys have such a great pulse on what's happening in the state and all the economic development movement, which again, the biggest one in history was this past week with Intel. But Karthik, thank you so much for being here. Excited to welcome you here and learn more about what you're doing at JobsOhio.
Thank you, Chris. I'm extremely honored to be joining this incredible panel. Firstly, apologies to everybody for my low voice. I'm recovering from recent COVID infection, so today is day 8. My name is Karthik Avadhanula, and I have been with JobsOhio for more than 8 years. In fact, I was the first intern for JobsOhio even before we had our funding mechanism in place. I work as Senior Director of Advanced Manufacturing. My role is to help grow manufacturing in the state by attracting new manufacturing investments, and also helping existing manufacturing companies grow here in the state. As you can see from the trends and data that we at JobsOhio are observing, Ohio is uniquely positioned at the cusp of a very high growth in its economy. We at JobsOhio call it the generational opportunity. You might have heard this term, Ohio's generational opportunity, if you recently heard from our CEO, JP Nassif, or the Lieutenant Governor Houston, or Governor Devine, or anybody from JobsOhio. And recent success with Intel's investment in Central Ohio, or Ford's investment in Northeast Ohio, are just examples of this generational opportunity. What we mean by this generational opportunity is that we currently are seeing a confluence of 5 important factors for Ohio that have differentiated Ohio and will help this momentum. 1, Ohio's economic value proposition, that is a business environment that we have. 2, the COVID calibrated economy and the supply chains, leading to more reshoring and inshoring investments. 3, Ohio's investment uniquely during the crisis, whereas all other of our competition try to cut down during that time. Number 4, recent positive global exposure that we have received. And number 5, the JobsOhio's public-private partnership model. So these are the 5. I can delve into any of these factors based on your questions, but looking forward to this great conversation.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Karthik, for that overview. And we'll stick with you if that's okay for our first question, and kind of digging more into what's happening in manufacturing, tech, and innovation in the state. And we've talked about Intel, and I'm glad you also mentioned with Ford and Lorain County with the EV momentum. I was up in Youngstown in the Mahoning Valley yesterday, and there's a lot of excitement around Voltage Valley and some of the new developments happening there. But there's really two kind of statistics that I pulled that I think really highlight Ohio's opportunity in this space. That the manufacturing sector employs over 600,000 skilled individuals in the state, and it's actually the third largest manufacturing workforce in the U.S. So Karthik, curious, why is Ohio, where manufacturing talent and this kind of next generation opportunity are really coming together? And what are you seeing the keys here? What are the drivers of growth in these manufacturing jobs?
So thanks, Chris. Yes, we are the third largest manufacturing state, but just to add to that stat, of the top three, number one, California, number two, Texas, and number three, Ohio. Surprisingly, if you look at the data from 2010 to 2020, the decade, Ohio was only the only state in the top three that grew its manufacturing workforce, whereas both California and Texas shrunk its manufacturing workforce, which was surprising. If we keep this pace, probably will be the second in another 15 years. But why are we doing well? Number one, our legacy. Ohio has traditionally been a manufacturing powerhouse, and we, right from when Ford's first investment in manufacturing cars in Detroit, Ohio has been a supplier state for all components that went into manufacturing a car. So there were pockets of large manufacturing centers developed from Northeast Ohio, Northwest Ohio, Central Ohio with Honda's investment. So we have over 100 years developed a strong powerhouse of manufacturing, various different components. We are the number one plastics products manufacturing state. We are the number one glass product manufacturing state. These are some of the stats that are not very well known. The legacy of it having existing manufacturing is very beneficial when you have a conducive business environment of low taxes, of no inventory tax, and the entire business environment that supports manufacturers, right? Going forward, what do we see as these momentum builders are three disruptive technologies that we think, because of where we are positioned, three disruptive technologies are what we are in the manufacturing space keeping very close eye on. One, additive manufacturing. Two, automation. And number three, advanced materials. These three things, we call it the AAA strategy for our manufacturing sector. And these three things have huge implications for Ohio's manufacturing because of how much we have.
Thank you for that. And Mike, I'd love to come to you because, we mentioned some of the big names that are global brands. And we'll hear from Michael in a second with one of Ohio's, proudly headquartered companies. But what are you seeing in kind of the evolution and the potential of this space from the startup side? I can think of groups like Path Robotics and Ready Robotics and Hyperion and Felix up in the Cleveland area. But it seems like more and more we're starting to see some of these manufacturing tech startups get spun up.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I'll because I agree with all the things that Karthik just went through. So maybe because we're seeing startup activity in some of those spaces, but just maybe two parts to that question. One is thematically, what are we seeing? And then what are some specific examples? So two or three areas that really stand out to us that we've seen a lot of. One is around how do you create connectivity and gather data across the manufacturing, one across the supply chain from, the source to where things are processed and then where they go throughout distribution. So how do you start collecting all of that data? But then you have a new problem. You have so much data. What do you do with it all? So we're seeing a lot of software, a lot of AI and machine learning technologies that help you gather all this data, and how can you empower a team, not just to have the data, but to prioritize what are we seeing in it? Where can we start to take action to improve our processes, create a safer environment, create better products for our customers? And then, maybe tangentially along the lines of what some of the things that robotics and automation help solve for, how do you think of workforce in manufacturing? Where can it fit? Where can you come up with solutions? So a few of the companies that we've been able to spend some time working with hit in different aspects of that. One, There's actually a company just acquired called Supply Dynamics. They do it's a software platform, but it's providing real-time visibility into the different material requirements across the supply chain. So how you can get efficient about sourcing your materials, have better cost savings, have more reliability that fit into your processes. Second, on the workforce side, we have a company called Upshift in our portfolio. They're a Cincinnati-based company, but they have a niche in their product where they're able to do staffing and temporary staffing for light industrial applications. So, you don't want to, one solution to downtime is automation. Another solution is to get people in there to run the machines that you do have. And then third, we see some things on the industrial and IoT side. So we have a company called Awareability that does a battery technology that has instead of a battery and an IoT sensor, you might need to change every 1 or 2 or 3 years. This might last decades or 100 years. We also have a company called UV here that can do non-Wi-Fi, non-GPS geolocation. So where is everything in my fleet or in my facility? Where is it to the millimeter? And can I make sure, especially as things are more automated, that lift truck isn't going to come around the corner and hit somebody? Is it going to come around the corner and stop and know what's going on? So between that, some of the startup activity that we see, those last 2 examples are spin outs of Ohio State. There's a lot of research and development in the space. So we're seeing increasing levels of activity across those areas that are really bringing a technological component to what is historically not seen as such an innovative space.
That's great. And Mike, I appreciate you mentioning, Ohio State as one higher ed example. I think of others like the University of Akron and, their rich history in this space, and the University of Cincinnati, and they have their entire innovation district and the 1819 Innovation Hub where they're doing incredible work. So if folks aren't familiar with those specific examples, check them out because they really are incredible. Michael, I'd love to turn to you for your perspective on this. Of course, Worthington Industries is an Ohio company, but you operate globally. So you're not just tied within the borders of Ohio, and you work with companies all shapes and sizes, increasingly on the startup side. So I'd love your perspective on this, of what you're seeing, trends and again, Ohio, but also kind of with your global view as well.
Sure. I think Mike and Parag both hit on some really big points. I think that, when we look at Ohio, it's really, really attractive. And I'm a firm believer that you're going to see our population grow over time as more people move up from the south, where, frankly, global warming is making it very difficult to live down there. Just the sheer temperatures, et cetera, and flooding. But you're also going to see people from the west moving into Ohio. Because frankly, between the wildfires and floods, flash floods, things like that, people are going to start moving to the Midwest because we have ample supply of water. We don't have to worry about water rationing here, right? That's not a problem here, and which is part of the reason why Intel is here too, right? Because they're interested in some place that has a lot of water for their production. So I'm seeing that. I think that the beauty about Ohio is also cost of living. Our cost of living is a very livable state, which is also a trap too. But it's a wonderful thing. You can live very comfortably here in Ohio for reasonable income, right? I also think that when I look at the future of where we're moving towards, I think the startups that Mike has been showing me and getting us involved in is stuff that will make us more competitive on the global scale. This ability to manufacture, we compete globally, right? Our competitors aren't just in the US, they're everywhere in the world. In order to compete globally, that means we have to be on top of our game, with everything. We can't just make it good enough anymore. It is that we have to be super efficient. We have to be, watch how we make things and have a skilled workforce available to help us get there. Yes, automation will get us to a certain point, yeah, but you still need skilled labor to maintain our manufacturing capabilities, et cetera. And without that, we're dead in the water. And Ohio is great for that because, as you mentioned, we have so many universities here, and a lot of technology, a lot of well-educated workforce that I think is a huge benefit for us. We have plants, as you said, we have plants around the world. And the trouble is, some of these locations we're in, it is tough to find skilled labor to back you up and hire them. So we've got a lot of openings around the world, and a lot of them have been open for a long time because we can't find the skills. In Ohio, I think it's a better place for that, better market.
That's great, Michael. And a couple kind of comments off that is one is, again, not to bring up the Intel example again, but the higher education system of community colleges and 4 years. I mean, it's basically cited, and every time Intel CEO and their corporate leaders talk of the competitive advantage Ohio brings to the table when it comes to that advanced manufacturing workforce. And then you also mentioned, Michael, the weather in Ohio's kind of geographic location. Certainly Lake Erie is one of our state's best natural assets, but I was just reading an article earlier today how in California, a Twitter data center shut down because of the massive heat spikes that have been happening out on the West Coast, which there's also a ton of data centers throughout the state, certainly in Central Ohio, from Amazon, AWS, Meta, and Google as well. But Michael, I'd love to kind of turn it back to you, and I think this is a good segue and kind of pivot to the partnership between Rev1 Ventures and Worthington Industries. And so it was just in July, a couple months ago, where there was an announcement and news around this partnership and how Worthington Industries is going to invest up to $10 million in startups from Rev1 managed VC funds. So would love to learn a little bit more, but maybe let's start with what was the driving force behind Worthington Industries to do this and want to strike this deal?
It's a great question. I think that when I look at our future, we don't have a giant R&D organization, unlike like P&G did. P&G has enormous R&D capability. When we looked at the strategy for Worthington, part of it was, this is kind of a glib way of saying it, but outsourcing our R&D. There are a lot of startups, really smart people out there who are doing some amazing things that frankly aren't our strong suit. And so partnering with these small startups who have great ideas, great technologies that would benefit us as a company, make us better, but also we might be a user of their technology, but also it makes us as a company better across the board. And I think partnering with Rev1 was key because I've got a lot of experience in the world of innovation. I don't have connections to all the startups in the world. And Mike and his team, they are fabulous. They are feeding me, and they've filtered thousands of companies to get down to probably, we're approaching 300 now, companies we've actually looked at. And, helping me through the filtering process of asking hard questions and saying what makes for a good company, which one should we invest in this one? I can view it from a Worthington standpoint of what strategically makes sense for us, where there's some of the problems we're dealing with that this small startup could help us with. But also I'm looking at the idea of, well, we're just one potential customer. Hopefully there are thousands of potential customers out there for the startup. And if that's the case, then let's help this idea grow. And our investments will be anywhere from $1 million, call it $1 million, up to $10 million on an individual company.
That's great. And I'll point out, you mentioned sourcing 300 startups in the article, and then the news announcement, it was 200. So it sounds like you all have been pretty busy the past month or two. So that's great.
We've been very busy. Mike's had a great team there, and we've gone through an awful lot at this point.
That's awesome. Well, Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and feel free to touch on anything Michael said. But one thing I'll kind of piggyback on is, Rev1 does this, with other big corporations, in Central Ohio, State Auto, Nationwide Children's Hospital, Ohio Health, for maybe an organization that has historically been viewed as, an investor, this kind of corporate innovation, getting into this side, what's the driver there? And I loved how Michael mentioned, bringing startups to customers and vice versa. I think that's another one of Ohio's competitive advantages.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And yeah, if someone in Michael's role ever is getting bored, I'm definitely not doing my job. So we got to keep putting things in front of them. But I think your question, what's the driving force behind some of this, and what what is it that kind of pulled us into this space? Because yes, we're a startup studio built to support entrepreneurs, but we do these innovation partnerships. And there's a couple of things that Michael mentioned in his last answer that I'll pull on a little bit. First and foremost, it's around that customer relationship. So corporations need startups, they need new technologies, they need innovations. This idea of external R&D, for most organizations, there is orders of magnitude more R&D going on outside of your organization than inside it. And there's a sliver of that is high growth, high tech, innovative new companies. And so how do we tap into that to find out which ones make sense for us to partner with, maybe invest in, because we can't create everything inside of our organization. What are the things that we can find partners and bring in? So that's one big thing. The second is that all of those startups are looking for customers. So how can we help those entrepreneurs not just get connected with Worthington, but really help vet both sides of that so that their time is well spent with higher probability opportunities. And the second we know it's not an opportunity, get them on their way, because a minute extra spent with Worthington Industries when they're not going to be a customer is a minute not spent with somebody who could help move that business forward. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're not trying to be experts in all these industries that we're in, whether it's mobility or insurance or in manufacturing. We let Michael do that. He's the expert in manufacturing. He's the expert in his team are the experts in their market. How do we create a symbiotic platform where our partners in Worthington can focus on their customers, their market, their technology, and we focus on the things that we're good at, which is identifying and vetting these startup opportunities. And that's really what we come to the table to do. So the idea of creating this win-win for our partners of how do we attract technology and talent to the region, Michael, like you said, to create a better Worthington is better for Ohio. It's better for the city of Columbus. But then for those entrepreneurs, how do we help them create win-win so they can find access to new partners, new investors with folks like Worthington and others?
Thank you, Mike. And I guess kind of, Mike, a follow on there that I'm curious about is, I've heard you guys mention the 300 startups you're vetting. I'm sure there's even, more just on the general radar. And I suppose that's not just Ohio, but kind of all over looking for, incredible solutions and innovative. And, maybe they will come to Ohio. I just read another article about a company moving from Kentucky to Central Ohio this morning. But, I guess kind of, are you seeing any trends on the kind of location of these? Because, I think in Ohio, Columbus, there's kind of been this InsurTech hub pop up. And you kind of see it in fintech, and in Atlanta, they have a lot of momentum that's been happening down there for the fintech space. But as you look globally, are there any pockets of where there's some innovation going? And if not, why do you maybe think that is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so this will be somewhat anecdotal because I haven't dug in and really tried to analyze all the data, but there's maybe 2 or 3 themes that stand out. One is as I was initially surprised at how much of this innovation in manufacturing is going on outside of the coasts. So there's innovations in Silicon Valley and Boston and New York, but there's a lot that's happening in the rest of the country, in the Midwest. So you think about a Supply Dynamics, like some of those companies that I just mentioned, those are Ohio-based companies. So where there's density of these manufacturers, of these supply chains, there's density of now seeing innovations and new companies start up around it. So that's one that's been really interesting to observe. A second one is in this area of sustainability. I think a lot of the things that we've looked at with Michael, we tend to see a lot of that happening in Europe. There's a different regulatory environment, a different pressure on certain parts of the economy there that are driving some of these innovations. So it's interesting to see some leadership in those areas. How will that follow here? Because those may be things that end up coming down the pike here in the States. And does that mean some of those European companies come here? Does it create an opportunity for new companies to start in this space? And then third, when we think of especially some of the software companies, we do see a lot of the data analytics and a lot of the software that does tend to happen more in some of the traditional hotbeds. So some of the companies we've seen are based in the Valley, are based on the East Coast. So we see some of those trends continue that you might see in the other sectors as well.
Just to piggyback off what Mike was mentioning, one other area that we are seeing a lot of a startup investment and companies moving to Ohio when they are still a startup is additive manufacturing, especially having America Makes in the Youngstown region here, and also Air Force Research Laboratories in Dayton region, with CDME here in Central Ohio, partnered with Ohio State. We have a lot of additive manufacturing companies that are moving. There are 3 or 4 examples in the last 3-4 years that have moved from Denver coasts to Youngstown and Columbus area. So and also some to the Dayton area, defense related. So on the additive manufacturing side, there is also a lot of movement, and we seem to have a lot more concentration of activity happening.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that, Karthik. And one thing that Mike, I enjoyed you mentioning that I'm glad you did, but sustainability. And I know Cincinnati, and I've heard Pete Blackshaw from Centrifuge talk a lot about some of the work that region is hoping to kind of really establish themselves as a hub in a sustainability and supply chain, and some of the opportunities that will hopefully continue to grow there. But Karthik, I'd love to kind of go back to you as we continue kind of in this kind of realm. But when a lot of what JobsOhio does is selling Ohio, going outside the state, finding companies, finding organizations, and trying to bring them here. So when you're doing that, what is kind of some of the and you've mentioned some of this, but as you look at the Rev 1 and Worthington Industries partnership example, what are some of these selling points that you're able to then point to, or that you do point to, and then kind of on top of that, and you mentioned this in your opening remark, as I believe your fifth pillar, but how is Ohio different and unique in terms of economic development, and what are some of the competitive advantages that you all are able to offer that maybe other states can't be as quick with?
Absolutely. So partnerships like this are extremely important, especially when we go to European countries where their model of companies partnering with universities and innovation hubs to develop technology is very common to them. And when we go to them, they ask us, where are these pockets? And that is when we try to bring them here to show them sites around and all of that. We try to make sure they are connecting with Rev 1 Ventures of the world and Youngstown Business Incubators of the world, so that they can have a sense of similar kind of activity happening here in their industry, so that they feel more comfortable coming here and putting their dollars here, right? Compared to other states where this kind of activity might not be happening. Coming to your second question about how is Ohio different, or JobsOhio different, the fifth pillar was JobsOhio. So JobsOhio as an economic development entity is a private economic development organization. It is one of the, I believe, only state level private economic development, fully private economic development organization in North America. There are very few of these across the world. One of the most successful ones you can see is the Singapore Economic Development Board, that was originally private and had very success in bringing a very small city country to the limelight, right? So being private helps in 2 or 3 different facets. One, we can mobilize funds and take advantage of the opportunity when other states have to go through very rigid processes to get approvals for the kind of investments they want to make. So for example, during COVID crisis, while many of the economic developments across the country had their funding cut because of their state funding being reduced, JobsOhio being private and having private funding, we double down on investments, on inclusive growth, on helping community banks reinvest, and helping companies with retention loans, job retention loans, and all of that. So by doing that, we are able to come out of COVID much more strongly than most of other states, surrounding states. That is number one. Number two, being private, we are able to have much more stronger conversations with the companies, because we can sign NDAs that are not subject to sunshine laws. So companies feel much more comfortable sharing more information. For example, Intel, right? Intel's investment, they felt more comfortable sharing their problems, because not everything can be solved with just money or a program. There are a lot of barriers to certain kind of investments, and those barriers they're only able to share upon confidence that we can hold up our end of the bargain in an NDA. Most other economic development organizations, because they are part of the state government, they are subject to sunshine laws, and you cannot share really that much information, competitive information. So that provides another level of advantage to Ohio. And third, and probably most important, is we are not bureaucrats. JobsOhio, if you look at JobsOhio, more than 90% of JobsOhio is the employees have previous industry experience. So, for example, my boss is ex-vice president of Rolls-Royce, or the gentleman that heads our IT function, IT sector, is the ex-CEO of HP worldwide, HP Asia, sorry. So we are coming from industry. So we have that understanding. When a company tells us these are certain kinds of problems, we are not trying to just throw money at it, but we are trying to really understand what exactly are their problems. And also, on the other hand, helps us see these trends in manufacturing, in IT, in logistics, see these trends and take advantage of those, and make wise decisions on where we should be, which companies to go after, right? For example, we knew Intel was potentially going to look for a location a year and a half, 2 years before we really got into the conversation. And even when they started the search, Ohio was not in the mix. Only after JobsOhio pushed the envelope to get Ohio in the mix, they started to look at Ohio seriously. So these kind of things, having a private organization lead economic development, has a lot of advantages to the state of Ohio.
Great. Well, thanks, Karthik. And Michael, I'd love to go to you, because we've been talking a lot about recent news, whether it's your partnership with Rev1 or Intel or Ford or some of the stuff in Voltage Valley. But as we start to kind of pivot towards the years to come and what Ohio needs to do to realize this generational opportunity that the JobsOhio team likes to call it, what do you think would make Ohio a stronger place to attract innovations, within the manufacturing space, but frankly, probably also, outside of it too?
That's a great question too. I think that there are some interesting parts about Ohio. We've got great technologies between OSU, UC, Case Western. We've got some great universities doing some great R&D. I think that, and I'm going to get on my high horse for just a second here. I think that there's three things that make a space for great innovations and great startups. I think that one of them is technology, and we have that. Hands down, we've got that. I think we also need strong strategies as a state as well as locally. And I think that what you see is, in sports, you learn a lot about strategies in sports, which is actually fabulous. It all stems from war strategy, right? I think the thing that's missing in Ohio that you see in California, you see in Boston, you see in Chicago, is actually art, which seems weird to say that, but art is what attracts the rebels. Artists themselves tend to be rebels, and good innovation means you're breaking some rules. A lot of them are unspoken rules, but you're breaking some rules. And in order to get there, you have to be conscious of what rules you're breaking and why. And I think that we could use, as a state, we could use more rebels, frankly. We need people who are not breaking laws, but they're breaking rules. And those are the unspoken rules within a company that, or in a industry that no one does. And you have to see, is there a benefit to breaking that rule? If there is, your idea might have great merit. And we just need more of the rule breakers within the state of Ohio. So, and I think that comes from the art world by having more artists. I mean, when you go through California, parts of California, you go through Boston, you can't help but run into art. And whether you like it or not, I don't care, frankly. I really don't care. What it does is, art does is it makes you see the world differently. And when you start seeing the world differently, it starts attracting more of that like-minded people. And it starts creating that culture as a larger community that sparks innovations. I think technology by itself is not sufficient to create a great new business.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. And Mike, I'll turn it to you for your perspective on that. But one kind of quick comment is at the Intel groundbreaking, Pat Gelsinger, the CEO of Intel, he actually mentioned that he likes to call it STEAM, to add the art to STEM, which, like same exact thing you're saying, Michael. So it sounds like there's a lot of folks, hopefully that share a similar sentiment. But Mike, I'll turn it over to you for your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'll just piggyback on something, Karthik, that you said, and I'll extend a little bit. And what the name of the company at Intel, I think we've mentioned it a couple of times here this afternoon. But you said, they started this search and Ohio wasn't even on their list. And Michael, I'll use some examples of some of our outreach. Often the first two questions that we get when we're talking to a new company, wherever they are, is, who is Worthington Industries and how did you find me? So somebody had to call up the Intel CEO and he's probably like, who is Ohio and how did you find me? So this takes intentional, active effort to bring innovations and talent to the region. And so when we think of, going back to what is Rev1's role in some of these partnerships, it's how do we help create that kind of infrastructure to where you're able to have the market intelligence and insights, but you're creating that impetus to go out and find it and bring it in, because it's not just going to happen. It takes intentional effort, whether it's investing in the arts community so that in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that you're starting to see things flourish in that area. But in the meantime, how do you create the effort to go out and find it and bring it in? And I think that's just a really important thing, that as we look at the next 5 to 10 years or more, whether you're manufacturing in these other industries, the companies that are going to win are going to be the ones who are allocating the brain power, the resources, and the time into those intentional activities.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on to what Mike just said. I'm going to build on that one. I think that what Rev1 is really good at is nurturing these startups that aren't asking maybe the right questions, but they're helping them get to the right questions and say, no, you can't go ask for more money, try to raise more money without answering these fundamental questions first, because you will not get that money. You'll be wasting your time trying to go do that. And I think that makes for more robust businesses at the end of the day. And they've got numerous successes coming out of Rev1 now. And that's part of the reasons why we partnered with them, because they are great at finding and nurturing those businesses.
Thanks, Michael. So now with our about 15 minutes or so left, I want to do kind of a series of round robin questions. So for each, we'll start with Karthik, then go Mike, and then end with Michael. But Karthik, so this first one that we have is kind of not Ohio specific, but kind of manufacturing, tech, and innovation in general. But as you're out there and you're looking at stuff all across the world, what is something in this space in manufacturing, tech, or innovation that isn't getting as much attention as it should? Something that you keep kind of looking at and thinking, more people should be talking about this, but they're not. So what's one that you got for us?
I am an evangelist of manufacturing technology investments. And you look at how internet has changed e-commerce, right? E-commerce and all commerce. And it was not overnight. It took 25 years. From 1995, there was a dot-com bubble. And then slowly but surely it took 15, 20 years from there to get to where we are today. We cannot even imagine living our lives without internet, right? With anything we order, anything we do, all of our commerce happens online. I look at additive manufacturing. It went through a similar kind of a cycle. It had a boom and a bust just before the pandemic. And there was this great video that HP, Hewlett Packard, the 2D printing company, put forth looking at 2050, where you would buy basically resin for your 3D printer. And tomorrow, if you're going to an event, you want to wear a certain kind of dress and a certain kind of clothing, you just order that, order the file, online file, just hit print, it will print it by overnight. You wear it, come back, put it in the recycler, and then it's ready to go for the next round. So imagine that world where we are going from 90% or 90+% of the products being produced subtractively to more than even 10 to 20% of the products being produced additively. Would completely change the supply chains, change the entire manufacturing landscape, right? So that is one technology because this is not an individual product technology, it's a process that changes the entire way how things are manufactured. So that is one thing we constantly keep an eye on, because it only takes an Apple kind of a company to bring together. The technologies still need to mature, but there will be a point in time in the future where individual technologies will be mature enough. There will be an innovator, a visionary who will bring all those together and create a beautiful product that will be able to produce things additively without having any technical know-how of how that works, right? So that is when we would have completely changed how things are manufactured. So that is what I'm looking forward to in the future.
Yeah, I love your comment about the process of it. And so Mike, would love to turn it to you for something that you're seeing in manufacturing tech and innovation that should be getting some more attention, but it's not.
Yeah, I think to me, I end up focusing on the opportunities, and it's something I referenced before, but an observation that I've had that I think needs some more attention or some more solutions in the space. So talked a little bit about the connectivity around a manufacturing plant, around the supply chain, and whether it's IoT devices or edge computing. We're gathering so much data and information across the plant, and there's a lot of attention on that. How do you get sensors here, sensors here, sensors here? But what it comes down to is there is a small team, sometimes just one person at any one of these facilities, and it's about this much of their job that they get to actually spend looking at the data, if they're lucky, and if other things aren't going wrong. So I think something that needs more attention is how do you come up with solutions, or there's a huge opportunity out there where if you can help analyze, synthesize, and prioritize that data to get the information in front of the right people, you can help make some of these plants more efficient. You can help make them safer. You can help find errors earlier in the process. So those are a lot of things that I think are missed, because what a lot of folks get to go do now is just whatever they can get their time and attention to on their desk, and getting the type of technology that can put that in front of you, the most urgent things in real time without having to pore over it for hours and hours and hours or days and weeks is something that I think we focused a lot on gathering the data, not necessarily the synthesizing of it.
Great, thanks, Mike. Michael.
I'll build on what Mike just said and Karthik said also. It's just that I think that we've moved this world from manual production to automation. And I think the next stage is smart automation and digital twins. 30 years ago at P&G, we were doing simulations, whether it was finite element analysis or simulating the lines, et cetera, to this new stage that Mike was referring to, where a plant manager or someone who's in charge of a line, they don't have time to go through reams and reams of data and try to make sense out of it. But with a smart digital twin, all of a sudden they can flag when something is wrong and not have to go back through, in real time or near real time, versus waiting, 3 days later after you've had that 5 minutes to go try to dig into the data, which is really like 3 hours, not 5 minutes. But for you to dig into that data, you don't have that kind of time. No one has that kind of time. How do you make it so that it is fully automated and it flags when those problems are occurring before they actually occur? That way you can get ahead of it and not wait till something disastrous happens.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. And we'll do one final one, which is actually kind of a two-part question. We ask these same two questions to end all of our roundtables. This one will obviously have a manufacturing tech and innovation focus. But the first kind of the two-part, and we'll do the same round robin order. But what's a future prediction for the future of manufacturing tech, the manufacturing innovation, with an Ohio lens on this, since that's really what our conversation is about today. So a prediction for the future of this space with an Ohio lens, and then a second one, which is a fun one, but what is your favorite place in Ohio? So maybe you're recruiting a startup to work with, or you're bringing a new company from overseas or one of the coastal cities into the state, trying to get them here to build their headquarters or an HQ2. What's your favorite place in the state? Where are you taking them? So Karthik, we'll start with you again, kind of a prediction for the space, and then a favorite place for you.
Well, prediction for the future, I think I already answered that, but prediction for the future is, I think a lot of Ohio's manufacturing is very well poised to take advantage of the opportunity here, and any investments now will only help them grow. With big kind of OEMs coming in, we will have a lot more opportunity here. So I'm looking forward to a strong momentum and growth of manufacturing here, and we will not bleed as many talented young people to the coasts and other regions when we create these jobs here. And my favorite place, so while Intel kind of deals get a lot of press, you'd be surprised that is less than 10% of our pipeline. 80+ % of our projects are with medium-sized companies that are already in Ohio expanding. And I get to visit a lot of manufacturing companies, a lot of these medium-sized companies across the state. And what I like to do most is eat a hamburger at a small family diner in all of these small places. My goal is, I love doing that, and small family diners are my favorite places in Ohio.
Do you have a favorite? Because I'm thinking, you go to Akron, it's got to be like a Swenson's. If you're in Lima, there's like Koopy Burger.
So those are more very well known. I go to
okay, so even smaller,
off the path, even smaller, just a family diner. It literally says family diner, nothing else.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Very good. Mike, how about you? Kind of the prediction with an Ohio lens, and then again, favorite place that you're thinking of in the state.
I'm just right now. I'm thinking of diners and where I want to go for.
I'm getting hungry.
Lunch. Yeah, getting hungry here. No, I think a prediction for the future to keep an eye on. It ties back into the sustainability component. So something that we see a lot even in different sectors is around material science. So there's sustainability pressures. There are resource scarcities. So that the companies that can invest in and find ways to get access to new streams of materials that can either match what they have today from virgin materials, or if they're able to diversify their supply chains and even create new products that can perform just as well with different materials. That's an area that I think is keenly interesting to watch because of just how much stuff we make in all parts of our life. So that I think the innovations in that area, what kind of new career field is going to create for folks who are getting PhDs in material science, and what kind of new opportunities it is for new processes and facilities is just going to be a really interesting area to watch. So I look at that being something that has some real groundbreaking changes over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And then as far as a favorite place goes, I was thinking about this as you asked the question. I swear I didn't come up with it as Karthik was explaining his, but I put down a small little family diner in Columbus called Portia's Diner. If I had one place to go, I'd go to Portia's on Indianola in Clintonville. I could close my eyes and pick anything off the menu, probably 2 things, and I'd be perfectly satisfied. So Karthik, if you haven't been there, let me know. I'm happy to host you there and get you a new diner on your list.
That's awesome. It'll be like the some of these brewery tours or something, but the diner tour. And again, this is a dangerous question to pose during the lunch hour. So we'll good thing we're wrapping up soon, and we can all go grab a burger. But Michael, how about you? If you want to wrap it up for us.
Sure. I think a couple of things. I already talked about the water here in Ohio, which is fabulous. But I think that I'm sure Karthik could probably give me the actual data on this one. I think that when I look at Ohio, one of the interesting things about it from a manufacturing standpoint is you can reach over half of the U.S. population within a day's ride of here. So from a manufacturing standpoint, that's a fabulous place to be. Ohio is a great place to be, right? And I think you're going to see more and more industry come to Ohio because of that. Doesn't mean they're not going to have a West Coast branch of something out there, but from Ohio, you can reach a lot of the U.S. in a very short distance. And I think that makes us really efficient. Cost of living and all the other things I've talked about before, I think it makes Ohio very, very attractive to come. I think that the flight of people to the Midwest and that we have a strong infrastructure to support that makes a big difference. And so I think you're going to see more high-tech businesses come here. You're going to see, like the Intels of the world, to others. With that, going to come a bunch of other businesses to support that. And I think that bodes really well for Ohio. As far as my favorite places to go, the easy one for me was Hocking Hills, but that's generic. I think that it's my favorite place and my most hated place are the one and the same, which is my home. I've been renovating a house for a number of years. It's a love-hate relationship. I love it when we do it, and I love doing the renovation myself, because most of my job, it takes years before you see any result from. So this is instant gratification. I do something, I look, I patch this wall or whatever it is, right? It's instant gratification. So it is a love-hate relationship.
That's great. Well, thank you, Michael. And that's a perfect segue to wrap up for us today. But again, Karthik, Michael, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your work. And more importantly, what you're doing each and every day. It's a exciting time in Ohio, a generational opportunity for our state. And this is an area that really matters. And it's something that has only become more at the forefront of attention and importance over the past couple of years. And so it's great to see so much excitement and momentum in this manufacturing, tech, and innovation space. Again, thank you to Rev One Ventures for their support, their partnership, and making this conversation and a lot of our work at OhioX possible. We're incredibly grateful for that. But we'll wrap up for today. We appreciate everyone for tuning in, and have a great day, everyone. We will all see you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.